and begin also with our land acknowledgement. I'd like to acknowledge that we live and work on the unceded land of the Dena'ina people and thank them for their past, present, and future stewardship of the land on which we live. Can we proceed with a roll call?
Brian Flynn.
Here.
Matthew Harvey. Robert Helzer. Lindsay Hobson.
Here.
Mark Lucan. Carla McConnell.
I'm here.
Jared Riedel. Rachel Reeves. And Carmelo Warfield.
Present.
Mr. Nolan Clouda.
Present.
And Mr. Al Tamani. You have the floor.
All right. Looks like we have a quorum to conduct business. Yes.
May I interrupt? So Mr. Helzer was on team.
He is. Yeah, he's on. Did you get him? Yeah, you got him. Okay,
Okay.
cool. Yep. So we've got a quorum to do business. If folks have had a chance to look at the agenda, I would entertain a motion to approve.
This is Carmela. So moved.
Is there a second?
A second. Lindsay.
Second, thank you. Then I'll move quickly on. I'm going to forego a report from the chair, but we do have folks from the police department here today, so definitely excited to hear from them. Police department's, of course, one of the major departments in the city, big driver of the city budget for good reasons. So excited to hear what they have to say. But I'm going to move forward with to the assembly report. Ms. Brawley, I think, has a little bit of a time constraint as well.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, happy to be here. So I will give a brief report. Let's see, I guess between your last meeting and now, we had passed the budget and took up the mayor's vetoes of part of the budget amendments and overrode those vetoes at our last meeting on the 5th. That doesn't mean the budget's done. Of course, it's a year-round process, especially for those who implement the budget. One of the big jobs of the assembly then is done for this year. So thanks everybody for weighing in, and I know you guys took the time to review the budget as well. Let's see. I guess I can cover some of the big things in the budget, and then just a little preview, and then I'm happy to answer questions about other things going on. At the assembly, we've always got a lot happening. So in terms of the budget, let's see. So the final budget, we use, I think, a couple $1 million under the cap still. I'll have to look at the numbers specifically, but that's for the operating budget. One of the biggest things that the assembly and I know the administration supported was pay increase to the police. So they can speak more to that in detail because it was basically part of their new contract being negotiated multiple years, but that's now reflected, at least partially reflected in the 2024 budget. And I am not the expert on, represented employees by APDEA versus non-represented, so they can kind of get into that if you want more detail. I'd recommend kind of understanding that. I'm still understanding all of our bargaining units and how they fit in, even within one department. So anyway, I will defer to them on that. Some of the other things that we funded, of course, housing is a priority. So we put money toward a housing fund, $500,000. And I know there were a lot of questions about that. So, the idea is not just to, kind of throw the money in there and not think about it again. But there's a lot of different things that the assembly has been working on in terms of, things like incentives, funding for capital purchase of hotels, for example. That's something that we've used ARPA funds for. So lots of kind of different opportunities to use that funding. And I think that the goal for starting in 2024 is to continue those discussions and then put some more specificity on it. The money is with the real estate department, I believe. And so more coming there, but it's in the budget. Trying to think. Another big one was adding some money for snow plowing. I know, of course, that's been a big topic of discussion. And actually, I'll touch on that after the budget as well. But in the budget, we added $750,000 for what we're calling a mission critical pay increase. This was modeled on what started at the Anchorage Airport in 2022 and now a couple of the other state airports, Fairbanks and Bethel, are using this as well. Essentially, it's additional pay to the workers. It was negotiated as part of their labor agreement, on top of that, as opposed to opening the whole thing back up. But recognizing that, we want to keep folks in those jobs, they get more efficient, more skilled as they get used to, doing the same full stacks every year, that kind of thing. So really wanted to make sure we have our folks in place. And of course, as of last week, we still had several vacancies there. So that's a big one. Trying to think. Feels like it was so long ago now. Any other big budget items? I think there were several, so if there's questions, but I think our newsletter really outlined kind of what some of the details were, and I'm happy to take questions there. Before I do that, I'll mention on the snow plowing front, and I know if Meg Zalatel was here, she could speak to it in more detail, but we had a meeting last week of the Enterprise and Utilities Oversight Committee. So that's one that in the past has took up issues like snow plowing. We had great conversation both with the administration. So thanks to the folks from the mayor's office and our municipal manager who attended, as well as our Paul Van Landingham, our maintenance and operations person for plowing and street maintenance. And then we also had folks from state DOT. So that was great to have our central region folks, staff in the room to be able to ask questions, because I know there's been a lot of questions about, who's responsible for which roads, how do we improve service across, both state-owned roads and city roads? Is there a way to better coordinate? So I appreciate the administration did, actually both folks did kind of a debrief after the big snow events in November. Things that went well, things to improve. There were questions about, how much the municipality will be reimbursed for helping out on the state roads. And my understanding is, I think the total is 35,000 was negotiated. I think it was 30, and then I've heard 35. There was some additional piece. So I don't have details on that, but that was a question the public had. And then on the assembly side, and I think the administration as well, we want to see a better level of service. We want to be coordinating efficiently as much as we can. Taking care of not just our roads, but also sidewalks, knowing that that's also a big cost. And then I think where there's some difference right now, and then it sounds like maybe at some of the state level as well, state leadership, is how much more resources do we put toward this activity? So we talked about, I think the metaphor was you don't want to staff up staff up your department the way you would have parking for Easter Sunday at church, right? You don't need to build to the extreme. But also, I keep thinking of electrical utilities. You have to be able to provide electricity, not just for normal use, but, accounting for peak time. So I think there's some middle ground in there. And so one request that the Assembly has made in our legislative program is basically more state operating funding to South Central DOT, specifically for state-owned roads in Anchorage. So that's a conversation we'll have in June. And then on that point too, at our last meeting, we passed our legislative program. So that is something the municipality does every year, basically outlining our request to Juneau, both funding requests and policy requests. So one example is Senate Bill 77, Senator Dunbar's bill, the Blight bill, it's been called, around tax incentive, giving municipalities more tools in terms of tax incentives and ability to deal with nuisance properties that are causing public issues. So that's just one example of not just a funding request, but something that we are advocating for, that we support, that hopefully we can utilize at the local level. So lots going on. We have our last regular meeting on Tuesday. We're taking up the housing strategic plan. That's a whole other conversation, but there's lots going on and really wrapping up a really, I think, productive and busy year. So with that, I'll stop and see if there's questions.
Questions for Ms. Brown? One item that I think was added back into the budget by the Assembly was the vacancy scrub, was basically the 2.6 million was added back into the budget. Is that correct?
Yeah, that was one of the amendments that we had made, and then was the veto was overridden. And a comment on that too. I know there is, you know, we've got a difficult situation right now. So this morning I was at the Community and Economic Development Committee. We heard about how few folks we have working in the permit office there. So, you know, the folks who do permit review, our inspectors, you know, so we have good staff. We just don't have a lot of them anymore, right? And that's just one example. And so it is a trade-off because we do anticipate that 2023, you know, will be underspent, and part of it is all of those vacancies, right? So that is the trade-off, is how much vacancy do you plan for? And then, you know, do you still, you know, basically collect the taxes in the hope that you could run it, or do you try to cut back? And then we've talked before about the long-term consequences of cutting, when you're talking about cutting the operating budget because of the way the tax cap works. So all of that to say, I know that's going to continue to be a conversation, and yeah, I think what we're hearing across multiple departments is that balance between being efficient, being good stewards with our resources, and also having the people to do the work to provide the level of service people expect. And I think in a lot of areas we're just not meeting that mark for the public.
Yeah, Al?
I think on plowing the snow, why we've had an exceptional year with all the snow that we have gotten. And I think that to plan on that on a continued basis, maybe once every 20 years, is something we should really take a look at.
Yeah, I think so.
And I think you have to consider also, if you've got 1 foot of snow versus 4 feet of snow, it's going to take you longer to plow because you can't go as fast or push as much. So I think that, you know, those things have to come into the equation. And I think another question I've got is, how much was the Assembly's budget increase, you know, this year?
Do you mean for snow plowing or overall?
The Assembly's own budget. How much are you guys going to spend on the Assembly?
That is a good question. I'll need to add it up. So we did add some more resources. One is an additional attorney, you know, partly because we've, you know, and I've experienced this too. We've struggled even to get things on the agenda that we've been working on for a couple months, you know, and let alone being able to, you know, review budget documents or review other code changes, or, you know, basically just giving us the advice that we need. And so, you know, recognizing there's vacancies in Department of Law, and Department of Law, of course, works with the Assembly, but also works with the administration. It does a lot of other kind of functions that the city needs. So, so that's one of them. We added additional funding for our housing work, you know, again, recognizing that we need code drafting support, not necessarily a lawyer, but, you know, to be able to actually move through and do all of the housing work that's needed, especially with the staff shortages on the admin side, to be able to do that. So I need to go back and get a number, but we did certainly make some increases. Some of them are one-times, other ones are anticipation of needing more staff. The other thing I'll say is, you know, we have, I think in the last few years, we've had 1 full-time staff person, our legislative services director. We have a communications staff now, who's really been helping actually educate the public about all these housing issues and other things that we're doing. And then we also have now 1 policy and research person. And beyond that, that's our staff, right? I mean, so we have members have the discretion to have a part-time aide. Mine works at most 10 hours a week. He's a UAA student. So really not a functional staff person the way that, you know, legislators have, for example. And so I think it's really been a positive, and I think folks have seen the impact of having more basically staff support, not just for individual members, but for the branch to be able to do our work.
How many staff do you have total?
Well, I mean, if you look at the Assembly branch, we've got the clerk's office, the ombudsman's office, and a couple others that we don't directly oversee or manage, right? We work with them. In terms of our staff, it's really 3. And then we have our budget analyst, who's actually in the clerk's office, but works, you know, on the budget from the Assembly side. And then our council, I think, let's see, we have 2 of them right now. So I can get you the number. I think it's between 20 or 30, but that would include the clerks and ombudsman.
Okay.
Yeah, from an overall beauty budget perspective, there's not a lot of meat on that bone as far as, the assembly is a tiny share of, compared to, any of the big departments for the municipality. So
Yeah.
it's not.
Well, and to be honest, I think what I found surprising about part of this job is really because we are thin staffed in so many areas on the admin side as well. A lot more things fall to us. There's a lot of emails I get that are, hey, I contacted the health department. I haven't heard back in several weeks, or, so whether it's kind of helping try to shepherd things along, or people literally come to us and say, hey, this needs to be corrected in this resolution. It wasn't written correctly. And so I feel like I personally feel, and I think the other members feel the impacts of not having as much staff support to do a lot of the work of government, to the extent that it is things on our agenda that, either come to us for a vote or that people expect to get done.
Other questions, or yeah, Matthew?
Yeah, sorry, I was a little bit late
No,
today,
no problem.
but I think some of the snow plowing questions, most of them are about M&O focused stuff, so I'll save those for the next meeting. But I was just wondering, maybe, we passed a resolution about the budget. Did you, or maybe you hear about any of the other assembly members seeing that, or maybe have any feedback on how to make that resolution better? Or, did you see the resolution that we had passed about the budget?
Yeah, and I appreciate that. And I remember when I was, at this table with a different role, we made a point to weigh in via resolution because, Budget Advisory Commission, right? So it's doing your job. I can't speak to how other members received it. As you know, Open Meetings Act means that we can't talk about stuff that's going to be on our agenda. So with the budget, it was always tricky, making sure that we're coordinating. But yeah, no, I really appreciate, and of course, we don't always take everybody's advice, or we don't, necessarily incorporate it, but I think it's important. And I think it's really important for you guys to understand the budget process. So I think even, from that perspective, participating in it, making sure this body, the BAC is staying active and doing its job. And then the budget process is complex. And so it does take a while, but kind of learning where to focus and also understanding, I think, the constraints that we have, right? That there are impacts if you make major cuts, or, there's a lot of things that it's not a policy choice in the budget. It just is, continuation budget, planned labor increases, things like that. So yeah, thank you so much. And you'll have to ask other members if they read it, but I certainly did. So.
I should belatedly mention for the record too, that we were joined by Al Tamani and Matthew Harvey, after roll call. Did you have another one, Al?
What's the plan for housing the homeless? This week?
So as far,
And the reason I asked that, I've asked different assembly members, and as well, we're working on it. But this has been going on for 3 years,
yeah,
and you still don't have a plan.
I don't think it's accurate to say that we don't have a plan. I think the plan has certainly shifted. There's been disagreement, right, over the years, before I got on the body. We have a plan right now, which is we funded non-congregate and congregate shelter, and it's housing, or not housing, but sheltering 574 people every night, give or take. We've got folks doubled up in hotel rooms. We've got up to 150 at the shelter. And what we're hearing is certainly there's more demand than those beds we can provide. In addition to, of course, Brother Francis Shelter, Gospel Rescue Mission, Awake, all these other kind of organizations that provide shelter for different groups. I think the real question that we're working on is what do we do after this winter? Because I think we're doing what we can. We certainly could do more, but we'd have to find the money to do that. And we're working on those partnerships that we need. We're asking the state to provide more shelter operations funding, because that's not something HUD does. We are working on housing as fast as we can. We're really focused on getting folks into housing, those small units, so that they can get back on their feet, start paying rent, or I should say with housing, they are paying rent up to their ability to pay with income. And then vouchers often fill in the rest. And so I think long-term, that's the real question, right? Like we should not be building maximum shelter capacity to the point about building to your peak, right? We don't need 1,000 shelter beds. We need people to be in housing, and we need ways to get folks from shelter to housing or directly into housing. And so that's really the focus. And I think it's tricky because people keep saying, what is the assembly doing? As I said, we basically have 3 staff and a couple attorneys. We are not the executive branch. We don't run the health department. We don't get those grants out the door, all of those things. And so I think there's been some confusion about, and understandably, because I know the assembly has stepped in and tried to figure this out because it's such a big issue. But ultimately, it is not just our job to do that. And it's really difficult to just be trying to do that in a vacuum. And so we're trying to work with other partners. We had great meetings with the city of Houston last week. They were up explaining their whole system, which is basically getting folks into housing. They've seen a 60% reduction in people experiencing homelessness over the last 10 years. And that is almost all due to investment in housing. They said they have very few shelters. They've had pretty good success rate. They've worked with landlords. So I think it's not that we don't have a plan, it's that we have a plan. We need to get folks to commit to it multiple years at a time. We need to find the funding to do it. And then we need to sort out what is the city's role versus the state's role in funding versus HUD's role. We're asking for more federal money. And then also the big picture of we need more housing in total. So how do we make that happen?
See, and I think we've got a question from Carla, and then we'll probably have to move on after that. I think you're probably about out of time. So yeah, go ahead, Carla.
Okay, thank you. First of all, I'm out in the middle of nowhere, so I hope I don't lose you. And second of all, I'm almost out of battery, so I hope I don't lose you again. But what I really wanted to say, thanks for taking our questions. When we discussed our resolution, one of the things we discussed was this funding for the empty positions that you just mentioned, and you talked about how the budget process was a little bit difficult. But here's the thing: some of these positions have been empty for years, and which means to me that as a city, we collected taxes on those particular. Now I guess my question now is: did you fund those positions 100%, all empty positions, or did you guys only fund the one?
I'm sorry. Sorry, we lost you a little bit there. We lost part of your question, but
I think I understood it though.
Yeah, I think we got the gist of it.
So the basic question was: did you only fund did you restore funding for all empty positions, or did you restore funding only for those that could have been filled in the next fiscal year?
Yeah, that is a good question. And I know that came up, for example, with the IT department. There's positions that are extremely specialized that have been hard to recruit for, and that discussion came up. So we essentially reversed that particular, the cuts to those specific departments, the vacancy items. And I believe in addition to that, there's also the budgeted vacancy factor. So, I mean, Sharon could speak more to how that works in the budget. But just to say, vacancies are always accounted for like you would with any business, right? You assume, or if you own apartments, you would assume a vacancy rate. So you're not overestimating your revenue. I think, in terms of kind of operationalizing that, we don't have a lot of visibility into which positions are most likely to be filled because we're not the HR department, right? And so the budgeting process doesn't really, I guess you could, start to get in the weeds and make those line item changes, but we didn't really go there. We wanted to make sure that that the funding was available, the positions were still in the budget, and then it's really up to the departments to be able to determine what that looks like. And I guess I'll quote my fellow member, George Martinez: we don't want to bet against ourselves. We don't want to just assume that all those positions are vacant because, for one thing, they're probably there for a reason. I mean, there's been several cuts to this operating budget over several years, especially as state revenue was pulled back. And then, we've seen the consequences of that. Several years ago, we had issues with the police department that we're trying to rebuild and other departments. So I think, we will still see some challenges. We know we're going to have, as I said, fund balance from 2023, a lot of which is going to be due to vacancies. And that's going to continue to be a conversation. I think, given all of our other issues, it also provides an opportunity to utilize some of that funding to address some of the issues we have, at least on a one-time basis. You know, whether it's snow plowing or something else. And so I think that's that.
But you see what I mean?
Yeah.
You know, the taxpayers are your customers, and we, as far as I know, have been collecting from the customers for positions that haven't been filled, the ones that have been long-term empty. So I don't know. I kind of wish that maybe that was a consideration. I think that was kind of part of our resolution in a way, but anyway, appreciate your work. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. And yeah, just to say, I mean, it is an ongoing conversation. I think we should be realistic about the size of staff that we need and for what purposes. But I think also, you know, what we're seeing is basically, you know, the vacancies that, to your point about customer service, we're not giving good customer service if we don't have the people to do it. And so that'll just continue to be a conversation, I think.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us, giving us an update. Then if we can move on, next, I think we've got Kelly Lessons from the Anchorage School District. If you want to give your report briefly, Kelly.
Great, thank you so much. First of all, Katie Parrott, who is with our OMB, said she is in another budget meeting. It's the season, and she will be happy to follow up if there are additional questions. So to be brief, it is the busiest time of the year. Somebody said that earlier. Last week, ASD hosted a second Academies of Anchorage community convening session. This is with our partners at UAA, the Chamber of Commerce, AEDC, and this is like the seven dwarfs. I'm sorry, I'm forgetting the fourth major partner, but and hundreds of community members, really to establish what we're calling the tactic teams that are going to be needed to think through how we have this new system of college and career ready graduates ready to go. We're rolling out freshman academies in the fall of 2020, next fall, in the fall of 2024. And those freshmen will then begin their career pathways as sophomores in the fall of 2025. So we're talking about the class of 2028 and beyond. So that's really exciting work. ASD at our recent board meeting passed a one-year contract with the Anchorage Education Association. That'll be for the 2024-25 school year. But really the big work right now continues to be backwards planning from March of 2024, when the Assembly will need to receive our budget. So that means in February, the board has to approve a balanced budget and then set it on to the Assembly. And to do that, the administration needs to spend the holidays and January preparing their budget book. And so the board needs to give guidance to the administration this month. So to that end, we reviewed our pro forma budget at our last work session. And again, it was part of our board meeting agenda. The takeaway, maybe you've seen the news results, I know I've talked about our deficit here before, is that the administration is now projecting a $98 million structural deficit. The reasons are many and complex. It really comes down to things like the 0.5% increase to the base student allocation over the past 8 years, although we have confronted something like 28% rate of national inflation. We have backfilled our budget for the past 4 years with federal relief funds. Those are expiring, and we will now be forced to come to a reckoning that has been long predicted. I will say the role of health insurance and benefits continues to play an outsized role in ASD's expenditures. We're seeing increased utility and insurance costs. So what does the $98 million mean? We have, well, the glass half full is that we've had historic numbers of vacancies and attrition over the past couple of years that have replenished our fund balance. We also saved half of the one-time funds we received from the state at the end of the legislative session this spring. So we have between $53 and $71 million of fund balance. $53 million of fund balance is what we would spend if the board authorized spending down to our 8% board minimum. We would have up to $71 million of fund balance if a supermajority of board members authorized spending it down to a 5% minimum. So really like 1% of our fund balance is about $6 million. So there is certainly there are funds that we can apply to offset that deficit, but we're still talking about a gap of $27 to $45 million for the board to close. So what's going to have to happen is the board will need to agree on some kind of a layered approach to reduce our expenditures. There are, you can nickel and dime, $1 million to stop, to do less with our Chromebook replacement plans. You could trim the administration 3% or 5% and save, $1 or $2 million there. You can halt all travel for another, $500,000 or so. But really the savings that are going to be accrued tend to align with classrooms through pupil teacher ratios. So like a K through 12 pupil teacher ratio increase of 5 saves something like $31.6 million. That would increase kindergarten classrooms from a 22 PTR right now to a 27. That would increase our high school students from, 31 or 32 up, pushing 40. But even that is not enough. So really, everything has a price tag. If we were to cut all sports and activities, that's something like $5 million in savings. The Ignite program is something that, again, has been brought up, the middle school model. So anyway, so board members had a work session this past Saturday on to discuss these. I don't think that there was a clear sense of direction. My sense is that this is going to be a subject at our upcoming board meeting in our work session. And what I am looking forward to is community input. So before, I know we're short on time, the hub this year for all of our budget discussions, it's asdk12.org. That's the general ASD website /FY25. And until tomorrow, Friday, there is a survey, which is asdk12.org /FY25 survey. And that survey is something that happens on an annual basis, and it helps board members understand the community's values. I think the reality, as far as I see it, is that we can keep all of our programs and opportunities and massively increase our class sizes, or we can gut a lot of our programs and extracurricular opportunities and still increase our classroom sizes. So that's really, there's sort of terrible options wherever we look. So I'll pause right there.
Oh, yeah, that's a pretty dire picture. Thank you, Ms. Lessons. I think we have a question from Carmela.
Thank you, Mr. Hi, Kelly. The work session that you mentioned from last Saturday, it should be on the ASD YouTube channel. And I've heard from several community members and was waiting for it myself for it to start, and it never started. And I can't locate the recording. Is that going to be made available for folks that couldn't attend who wanted to see the work session and review it as they consider the budget process?
I will follow up with you. I wasn't aware that that was a problem. So I have your email from our prior Hillside Community Council. So I'll get an answer to you for that. And Nolan, I can CC you on that as well.
Thank you.
I mean, by all intents and purposes, yes, it should be available. We do try to promote transparency, but I'm not in charge of the electronics.
Yeah, no, most of the other meetings are out there. It looked like there may be some tech issues there may have been some tech issues last Saturday. It kept saying pending, it's going to start, and it just never did. And so
okay.
We've looked to the board docs website and other links, and it's just not there. So
okay,
that'd be great.
Yeah, thank you for the heads up. I will say that that the papers that the board has received, if you dig around on the /FY25 webpage, you can see what board members received in the work session.
And so the budget work session under board docs, I have it up in front of me. I don't see the accompanying documents. You have the agenda.
Okay, no, yeah,
If you could include that, that'd be great.
okay, I will add the docs to board docs. I think that there was an interest from the administration in creating that FY25 hub. So I know that you can get those items on the FY25 hub, but you're right. They should also be attached to the board docs. So I will follow up on both of those. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And I think in the interest of time, I think we'll probably have to keep moving, but thanks very much for the report, Ms. Lessons.
Okay, thank you so much.
Moving on, Sharon, is there an OMB report that you want to share?
I have a report, yeah.
Do you want to, so do you want to proceed with it at, or do we need to rearrange things so that the police department
Can do anything you want to do.
Okay. Yeah. How much, how long do you want?
5 minutes?
Oh, sure. Why don't we go
Okay.
ahead and do it then?
So I guess I have two things.
Uh-huh.
I again want to thank Councilmember Brawley for being respectful. And I appreciated her report, but I would mention that I think there's a belief among the assembly that the reason why we have vacancies at the municipality of Anchorage is because of a vacancy factor in the budget. And I would counter that the reason why we have chronic vacancies at the municipality of Anchorage doesn't have much to do with the budget. It has to do with a lot of factors that tend to overlay on each other, and I've written a few of them down. One is that the compensation structure at the municipality of Anchorage for some of the job classifications is not market competitive. And at the executive pay scale, it's not market competitive by at least a 50% factor. Number two, our HR policies and procedures, some of them are archaic by decades. And I'll give you some examples. Number one, our policy and procedure on telecommuting is archaic by 20 years. Our policy and procedure on parental leave has not been implemented, even though APDEA effective July 1 will have parental leave. So we rewrote it in anticipation of the fact that it's in code and it will be in the APDEA contract effective July 1. But there's a resistance to actually implementing the policy and procedure. There's others. Our recruiting practices are not robust, and this work environment is not particularly competitive with other work environments in the city that we're competing against. Those are our problems, not the vacancy factor. And until we solve those underlying problems, we're not going to solve the vacancy challenges that we have at the city. A vacancy factor is just a budget number, and departments can hire and go over their budgets, and they do so all the time. So there's a huge misunderstanding on the part of the assembly about what a vacancy factor is and does. And reversal of that $2.6 million item is not going to fill those positions. But now on to my report. I've been here now about a month, and I have one overall observation, which is that for maybe 15 years, the city, including the assembly, has struggled with a lack of adequate financial reporting. Every year, a report is distributed that used to be called the CAFR, but now apparently that acronym is not politically incorrect. I learned, and now we're supposed to say AFR.
Yeah.
And so using 2022 as an example, the 2022 ACFR will be very, very, very late and will not be distributed this year. So later than probably it has potentially ever been. But in the meantime, you shouldn't have to wait a year to get financial reports, right? You should be getting monthly financial reports. So I would ask you, do you receive monthly financial reports as a budget committee? I don't think you do. You should, and the assembly should be receiving monthly financial statements, which would include an income statement and a balance sheet or some balance sheets. But I can tell you they don't exist because I can't get them either. I know that they have revenue projections, but the ones that I see say things like, we can't predict revenue because no one's posting journal entries. Well, that's very scary. And OMB prepares quarterly budget to actual expenditures, but similarly, we extract things from the system, but if we're not recording journal entries, the system only can extract what's in there. And if we're not posting accounting entries timely, then what we're pulling out of the system is not complete. And I've also seen fund balance projections that are distributed, but they're scary to me because they include assumptions like the following. An assumption that in 2023, total expenditures for general fund will exactly equal budgeted expenditures for general fund. And that's crazy. That's a crazy assumption. They'll probably be less, but they might not, because PTO cash out could be a wild card because you don't really budget for it in general government accounting. So what is missing? Number one, monthly financial statements. But in the meantime, analysis, discussion of risk areas like workers' comp fund, which is outside of general government, but should push costs into general government, and for the last several years has been under pushing by about $4 million a year. So what that means is general government has been underspending by about $4 million a year. And if I had been here 6 months ago, the budget that came in front of the assembly would have looked different because it would have fully budgeted workers' comp costs. Or the building safety fund, Fund 163, is also a troubled child. And are you getting any information about that fund? I probably imagine not. Known items that eat away at projected fund balance. Every single day I hear, oh, I need this, I need this, I need this. And it's like a slow erosion of a beach, right? And we need to create a list of all of the items that people have dibs on, so that someone can actually more accurately predict what fund balance will be until we can recreate monthly financial reports. And so OMB is going to step forward and start trying to create some form of enhanced reporting. It's going to take a while, and we'll have to do it bit by bit, but I feel like we are remiss as a city or municipality by having none of this. And so that's my report.
Those are really, that's a litany of some very interesting challenges. I wonder if that's something the BAC should discuss in more detail, maybe in the new year, January or February meeting, because you're raising a lot of really sort of all really important issues. I've noticed most of those things too, including the change from CAFR to ACFR that confused me as well.
I can tell you because I Googled it,
Mhm.
and it's a derogatory term in the nation of South Africa, and it's the equivalent of their N-word. Yeah,
No,
that's why you can't say it.
that's interesting.
Yeah.
So, I do want to, I don't want to keep the folks from the police department waiting any
Yeah,
longer.
I'm done.
than we can, but I think that I do want to, I think that a lot of the things you're bringing up, I do think we should dig into in more detail. So
Okay.
let's talk about those. But I want to hand things over to Chief Curl and your team. And I really appreciate the weight that you guys have taken for us. So thank you.
All right, good afternoon now. Chief Mike Earl, Deputy Chief Sean Case, Warren Carpenter, my fiscal manager. So basically, we got a bunch of questions, and I guess I'll just answer the questions. I'll go over the department a little bit. So we have, we're authorized 621 employees, 441 of those are sworn, 180 are non-sworn. The department is broken up into, I have a collective, I have represented employees, those are my union members, and then I have non-represented employees, but the non-represented employees are broken down in two groups. We have the ones that are classified strictly for the Anchorage Police Department, such as the Deputy Chief of Police or the Chief of Police and lieutenants and captains. And then I have my non-represented employees that are classified the same way as everyone else in the city. And it's kind of hard when that happens because, like Sharon was saying, it's hard to equate pay for certain classifications specific to a department when it's citywide. It's a real challenge for us. And I'll cover that a little bit more later. But anyway, that's the department in a nutshell. I do have vacancies right now. I currently have about 42 sworn vacancies and 20 non-sworn vacancies. And those fluctuate. I have 2 academies a year for police officer. Those are in June and December. I just had 1 academy start December this month that had 20 people in it. And my non-sworn, I'm constantly recruiting and filling those positions year round. And we're constantly trying to fill the non-sworn positions. So basically, the staffing vacancies, challenging filling positions. It is challenging. A lot of it did have to do with what I think was the pay. My only competition in the state of Alaska is the Alaska State Troopers. Basically, we're the 2 largest police agencies. I'm the largest. They're the little stepchild. But they pay a lot more money than the Anchorage Police Department. And thus that's going to come down. Anna mentioned the 7.8% raise that gets us up. That was part of collective bargaining. We gave a 7.8% raise this year, at least the city and the union negotiated. They actually extended the contract for 4 years. Overall, it's 21% over 4 years. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Well, 21% raise over 4 years. And that kind of matches what the troopers did with their people. They also gave a 21% raise. We're still underpaid, but we do live in Anchorage, and that itself is worth a lot of money, if you ask me. So the offset in pay there, it's worth living in Anchorage to get a little less paid than the troopers. There's also some other things in there. But that's with the union members. That doesn't include the non-represented employees. So I do have challenges filling positions. It's the whole after COVID, the murder of George Floyd, I hate the police, defund the police. It took a toll up here. And hopefully my academy, 2 academies ago was 13 officers. This one was 20. We look for 28 per academy. So hopefully we can start filling those in the coming year with the pay raise and just the pendulum swinging back to, hey, we kind of do need the police. They're pretty important. So hopefully we can have 2 academies next year with 28 in each one, which would be 56 employees. I do have the largest budget in the city. Of my budget, 78% of it is labor, 17% is non-labor, and then I have about 5% of it, which are just transferred to other things to pay for services that we do. Let's see. So covered changes in full-time employees. We have added some employees this year. We added a mobile intervention team. Sean, this is your bailiwick. Explain to everybody what our mobile intervention team is. He's in the groundwork and created this. It's a new approach to policing that is paying dividends for us.
So the increase in the budget for the police department when it comes to mobile intervention is they're 2-person teams. They're an officer team with a mental health clinician. The officers are existing positions, so we didn't add any more officer positions. We added clinician positions. So we have 6 teams that are operational right now. And the design was to help the police department deal with those in mental health crisis. And the reality is after they've been on the street for 4 months, there's probably about 70% of the calls the police department goes on that they could have a significant impact on. So the bang for the buck that we're getting for these folks is well worth it. But right now they're focused on mental health. They're starting to drift into substance abuse, as well as different type of criminal calls. Primarily domestic violence is what they're starting to weigh into. So if you think of the domestic relationship, there's generally the assistance of someone who has training in, in counseling, that can be beneficial to that call and help navigate the victim and the offender, kind of navigate what's happening after that. And that is approach of looking at both halves instead of just the victim. So
But the team existed last year in 2023.
They were funded last year. We did
This year.
this year,
They were funded this, last year last year was a smaller team.
Okay,
It was
We
a
had one
much smaller, we had one team.
okay.
Then they added to this year, took a while to get the positions classified. And that's the hardest part, is creating a new classification in the city is a lot of work. And once that was done,
Yeah.
we hired the new people, and the fire department will follow suit eventually.
we hired them in June. We have 4 that are, the old team was 1. We added 4 positions that are being paid for by the municipality. And then we added 1 that's a grant position. That's a 2-year federally funded grant position. So a total of 6.
And some other full-time employees, what we want to do is, if we continue to have trouble filling sworn positions, we're constantly looking for ways to increase service to the citizens of Anchorage. So we want to go with maybe converting some non-sworn to sworn positions to do, like traffic control, or we already have people that deal with junk vehicles, just things like that. The police would normally go to, that we could have a non-sworn officer, or have another thing we're thinking about doing is having civilian investigators that would take the place of detectives. There's some things to work out with the union, but we're always looking for ways to bring in people. We'd love to be 100% staffing, and we continue working toward that. One of the downfalls when you're not 100% staffing, unlike some departments, we still need to man the streets. So when we are short, we're just making officers are working a lot harder, and we're paying time and a half or double time. So a lot of that offset for the budget actually comes back, and we're paying in overtime anyway, because we still have a responsibility to the safety of the citizens. So my overtime budget this year is through the roof. It's probably, I'll break records this year for overtime. Sean did mention grants for the one MIT position. So in addition to my budget, I do have a grant manager. This year I have $11,500,000 in grants that I got. With that, there is something that comes with it. I do have what's called contribution for grants. A lot of times it's a match that comes out of my budget. There's stuff that just isn't budgeted for. And I almost get punished because I go out and seek grants to pay for equipment that normally the city would have had to pay for, or services that we provide to the community. It's paid through a grant, and then I eat the cost out of my non-labor budget to pay for the matching costs, or the contributions that go to pay OMB or to pay other places to actually manage the grants. But I'll continue to do that, because $11,500,000 in grants that's pretty impressive for a single department here.
I'd like to talk about that offline later.
We can talk about
Okay,
that.
okay.
Let's see, in collective bargaining agreement, like I said, we do that with APDA. We just, the city and the union just did the 40-year extension that included that 7.8% raise for this year. You asked about capital equipment requests, expenses. So I think a major purchase needed for vehicles. So I think I need to explain, if you guys aren't aware, I don't own any of my vehicles. I don't purchase my vehicles. I would say I don't have a say in it. Because we're so forceful, we do have a say, but fleet is the ones that buy the police vehicles. And then I pay a fleet rental rate per vehicle per month to fleet. And that is budgeted for in my non-labor. I have a little over 600 vehicles, and the per vehicle it's a different charge, but it's probably about $5 million a year that I pay to fleet. That's supposed to cover maintenance and replacement. But I can tell you that what happened probably 15 years ago, fleet used to get about $4.5 million. This year they're budgeted for 2.3 for vehicle replacements. I go through, I have, how many? 2009 and 2011, I think I have like 70 something cars that are just, 2009, think of that, a police vehicle with 300,000 miles going around. They're not safe. And we've gotten away from where the fleet can actually support a 5-year regeneration of police vehicles. That we should have a 5-year overturn, which would be about we're thinking about 4 or 5 million a year for police vehicles alone, but fleet has to buy vehicles for the whole city, and they're given between 2.3 and 2.8 a year. So over the past few years, we have suffered, and our fleet is getting old. I can say the assembly is aware of this. The administration is aware. We are pounding on every door saying our cars are crap. So it would be great to have fleet have a lot more money so that they can replace our vehicles in a proper time period. One of those grants I did get this year was we got a $2 million grant from Senator Murkowski's office, worked through the federal government. And that was enough to buy us 30 vehicles, which will be here in March. And we're doing everything we can to replenish our fleet because it is just old. Equipment, we always need to replenish equipment. I mean, computers alone, the replenishment of computers for the whole department. There's things that just aren't budgeted for. Like Anna was saying, a lot of times we get continuation budget with the increase of, so continuation budgets for us for our non-labor. I'm short probably $1 million a year now for non-labor because I've had the same non-labor budget for years and years and years. And let's face it, everything costs more. My uniforms cost more, ammunition is through the roof. There's just the vests that we wear cost more, even though I do have a grant that pays a portion of that. The vests cost more. The maintenance agreements for all my software maintenance to do on the buildings, everything costs more. And basically we're doing a lot. I have the luxury, which some of the other departments might not, with my vacancy factor. This year I converted 700,000 from labor to non-labor. And I will just about skate by this year with paying for all my non-labor stuff. So that's my biggest concern here is I do need a bigger non-labor budget. And it's just because everything costs more. And when you have continuation budgets, you can't account for that. And as we get into technical ages, the software agreements and for those things, they raise their rates every year. We just can't counter with that. So that's one of the major things I need. And facility maintenance, facilities deals with, they do maintenance on our facilities. So they're going to have to keep up with the two. If you didn't know, the Anchorage Police Department, we have several facilities. We have the downtown headquarters here. We have Elmore, which holds a lot of my patrol officers work out of there. My dispatch center's there. Property evidence is there. And a lot of my records people are there. At the training center at Jew Lake, that's where we do our training. I have the Ted Smith Range out there in Chugiak, which is a range complex. I have other places that I use for storing some of my evidence. I have places that I park my specialty vehicles. And what am I missing here? That's it. I have a lot of facilities, and every year just the maintenance of those facilities goes up. Debt service impact on the department. We really don't have the debt service doesn't imply us. A real estate service deals with the debt service now, so that doesn't affect us at all. All right, the next question you had was, how does the department engage in long-term planning to address evolving community needs and infrastructure requirements? This is pretty simple. We're a big organization. We do a strategic plan, and we have a 5-year strategic plan. If you want to see it, it's not posted. The version to be posted, we're tweaking the current version. Unfortunately, until myself and Deputy Chief Case came in, there was no strategic plan, so I'm not sure how they planned for this. But since we've been here, that was our goal, to get a strategic plan. It's been in the works. We base things off our strategic plan. It's just not fit for the consumers yet. Probably in about a month or two, we will post it on our website. So you'll be able to see our strategic plan out there. This is how we address the concerns of building maintenance. We address the concerns of vehicles. We address all that in there, how we look forward to it. How does the department make decisions to purchase or expand our fleet? We don't. That's done by fleet maintenance, but we do have a lot of input into it, saying, hey, we need to replace our fleet. Like I said, the $2 million grant I got this year from the feds. I also moved $1 million from my budget to capital this year. It's in the works now to buy an additional 21 vehicles this year. So they'll come next year sometime. So I'm doing things to help capital, to help fleet, because I'm I just need the help. I need vehicles. My officers are in junk cars, and if the car breaks down, it doesn't do them any good, and we don't provide the service we should to the citizens of Anchorage. How does the department engage with the community to gather input on maintenance and operations priorities? So basically, we have community council meetings, email, we do coffee with the cop, we do community engagements all over the city. We do unlike the city, the police department is actively involved in recruiting. We go to over 200 events a year. We're actively out there recruiting, accepting input from the community to make the police better, and we listen to the community and we listen to their concerns. Let's see. Well, those are all your questions. Some of the other capital projects for this year, we only had 2 capital projects. My 2 capital projects that I listed for this year, the roof replacement at our Elmore station, it's well overdue. I'm asking for $1 million there. And also Elmore station heating, that building was built in 1970 something, I think. And it's kind of weird. The heating system's really old. We need to replace the boiler and look at the heating. There'll be parts of that building you go in, it's 200 degrees, and then other parts it's -20. So it's really strange. We need to redo the heating, and I asked for $2 million this year. There's other things we want to look for in the future. Paving and grading at Elmore. It's just, there's a puddle, there's a lake that forms there every spring. It's just strange. We need to repave, resurface the parking lot there. Gym equipment, that's one thing. I need to keep my officers physically fit so that they can deal with the community. We're looking at an EVOC. Eventually currently we do EVOC. That's how we teach people how to drive. So EVOC is, we do a lot of pit maneuvers, how to drive properly, how to drive in the snow, how to do specialized police driving. Currently we use the base over on Elmendorf. They're probably at the point going to say, hey, you can't use this spot anymore. Eventually we're going to need a place to do EVOC training. We have a location which we already own at the Ted Smith Range. We would just need, we're thinking $5 million, maybe $5 million in the future to go out there and regrade it. All we need is a big flat surface that is paved and available to drive cars on. But unfortunately, I'm not in the construction business. Apparently a big parking lot costs about $5 million. That's what I was told. So that is in our long-term capital improvement budget. And eventually we'd like to get to a centralized evidence warehouse. We do have evidence at the Elmore station. We've expanded that already, but we still have warehouses that are outside of the agency that we're paying for on a monthly basis to store evidence. And those are just some of our long-term capital plans. So that's the police department in a nutshell. I know that was a lot of information to cover. Be happy to answer any questions.
Questions from the group? I'll make you go.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Beauty before age.
Okay. So I'm just curious about sort of like benchmarking with like other police departments. And I think the most alarming thing for me is hearing the age of your fleet and the condition of the vehicles. And so thinking about what % of fleet should be spent on maintenance because I just imagine that we are overspending on maintenance to maintain these vehicles and is there any benchmarking to know like what that percentage is?
All those benchmarks have been done. We've shown it. Fleet has done all this. It's all stepped out. I know they've presented to the assembly. There's a certain point where you start losing, as you said, the cost for maintenance is it goes through the roof.
Yeah.
And so Fleet has looked at that. The problem is that they're just not budgeted. And even though this is the police budget, I'm here to say Fleet needs a lot more money because they buy vehicles. And it's not only the police department, it's replacement for graders. And the only 2 departments that aren't included with Fleet are the fire department. They do their own, and the buses, whoever they transit, they have their own budget for buses. So those are the only 2. The rest of the city all goes through Fleet, and they have, I think they were telling me yesterday or a couple days ago, 2.3 million this year for that. And that's just not, I'm not even sure how, even though I'm budgeted to, right now I'm scheduled to get, if this thing goes through the assembly, I'll get roughly 49 vehicles police vehicles next year. That's through from this money. The money for next year, when they order the one, I mean, the cars don't come for, it's sometimes a year or two cycle. We actually switched cars this year because the Dodge Durango was available. One of my captains went down to a fleet expo and he said, hey, I have all these cars. I can get these to you. Whereas the Chevys and Fords just said, there's a 2-year wait on those. So that's why we actually switched. We've never had Dodge Durangos before, but we're switching 40 of my vehicles. Actually, 48 of them will be Dodge Durangos that will come next year. But we can expect to see them in March instead of February of 2025, which is good. And that's why we went to those. But you're right. There is definitely, once the vehicle gets to a certain age, I can tell you there's 40 cars sitting over at Fleet right now, police cars, if you want to drive over there, that are deadlined because they need engines, transmissions, and they just can't get parts for them anymore. So they're just sitting there, and we don't have an auction house either, so they can't even auction them to get rid of them.
I think it's over 70%.
It's pretty old. We have a very old fleet. Al?
I think you kind of pointed out what I thought, all your needs, and they are very, very well needed. But the aspect is, let's talk about land. Now, the school district has a bunch of vacant land around Anchorage, and they probably don't even know where most of it is. But they do have areas that are reserved for schools that are still got, some brush on them, all those things. You may want to check and see what they have.
Are you talking about for the EVOC Center? Or what do we need land?
Evidence storage.
Oh, the evidence storage. Oh, right. That's gonna, we're looking at that. The evidence storage building is probably going to cost about $120 million. That's gonna be one heck of a capital improvement. To build a new building, to fit our needs, that's why it's one of our long-term capital things. We did this before, and it's roughly about $100 to $120 million. And that was years ago. So we had the plans done. It just, it never happened. It's expensive to build a building here in Anchorage.
So that's not going to be on the budget, the bond issue?
It might. That's, like I said, that's what we're looking forward down the road. That would be a possibility to bond for in the future. And we'll work with the administration to figure out when it gets to that point, how we will actually fund it and where we'll put it.
Square feet.
I have no idea.
We can get you that.
Yeah, I can get you. Like I said, we have the plans for it. At least we had them, and our needs have changed. They require refrigeration, absolute 24-hour surveillance and security because it's evidence in there. And we have very strict requirements for whatever we build for evidence, obviously. And some of the stuff we have to store for ever.
Okay, I have a question, that you've got, the 2 academies a year. Does the university provide any training for people who want to become police officers?
They have they have a criminal justice program. So they go through there and the criminal justice program, that's how they do it. And then they would come over and go through our academy.
I see. So how many people do they have that take those classes? Do you have any idea?
It's one of their majors. So I assume the criminal justice doesn't go into policing though. It goes into anything. It goes into a variety of different functions. So not everyone that has a criminal justice degree wants to be a police officer. A lot of them would go to federal service, maybe become a lawyer. You never know what they're going to do. It's just a lot of offshoots too. So there's no police specific thing. And you don't have to have a degree to be a police officer.
Right, yeah. So how do you recruit then? Just from there and whoever else wants to
We go
apply?
to we advertise, we're gonna advertise on the buses. You're gonna see some beautiful people wearing uniform on the buses. We go to over 200 community events a year. We're at the state fair. You name it, we go there. We're all actively recruiting. We used to send people to lower 48 to recruit, but that we didn't get the bang for the buck there. We're in national magazines out there recruiting, and everywhere I go, like even here, you guys have friends and family that if they're not working or if they're not happy what they're doing, I'm hiring. Tell them to come on over. Police department's hiring. You look like you're perfect. Come on over. I'm hiring. I'll even take you. I have a good job for you somewhere, I'm sure.
Hey, at 85 years old, I'm a little old for that.
But we have extensive recruiting, and Sean, he's on the front line of it. We did this year we did a lot of times we try to represent the community, and a lot of times women in policing they're underrepresented because they just don't understand what it was. We actually had a symposium at the police department where we had business leaders, female business leaders from around the state come to our symposium, and we had a panel of women officers say, hey, this is what it's like to be a female police officer. And they're concerned about childcare, if you get pregnant, concerned about the use of force, all that stuff. So we had some of our female officers just answering questions in an attempt to recruit. Because there is a stigma associated with policing sometimes. It's not true. These aren't the old days where you just go out there. I won't even go. Al, you know what the old days of policing were? They're not that like that anymore. It's a professional, it's a compassionate police department, and everyone can fit in. And we recruit across the community so that we can represent the community.
Do you work with the high school seniors?
We do, but you have to be 21. So we have school resource officers. We do go to school functions. We get them. We have actually linked up with the military. So we'll actually go to recruiting. We'll have the military there with the police, and we'll try to sell it to their parents. We'll go to the parents and we'll say, listen, have your son join or daughter join the military. It doesn't matter what their MOS is for 4 years. When they get out, they can come to the police department and they'll have a career field. And we can set your child up for their life, get them experience in the military from 17, 18 to 21, 22. When they get out, apply to the police department, as long as they keep their nose straight, and then they're set for their life. So we're thinking outside the box. It's just that right now, the box has a lot of holes and people aren't coming through the box because unfortunately, the box still has a shadow over it that is undeserved, because policing is the only job in the world where the actions from one individual reflects on the entire profession. So one cop can do one thing bad and it gets the publicity that every cop is bad. And we need to overcome that. We need to single out, no, that person is singularly bad. It doesn't represent the profession.
So, Brian has a
Yeah,
question.
Brian, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to thank Chief Curl and your staff for coming in today. I wanted to speak firsthand. I had the opportunity to do a ride along with an officer about 1.5 years ago, and can speak to the fleet because the first hour of that ride along was spent picking up his vehicle, which was, I think, a 2009 Chevy Impala with 320,000 miles on it. So it kind of hit me at that, he's spending his time going and picking up a vehicle while he's driving yet another broken down vehicle. And we actually did kind of stall out on Muldoon during that ride along as well. And this brought all that back from that time with the officer, because I really did feel like not only was it embarrassing to have a broken down vehicle, but also unsafe for that officer. So I really feel for what you're going through, trying to get a replacement of all those old vehicles. And my second question kind of revolves around, there seemed to be a pattern of officers that were moving out to the valley and coming into Anchorage. Are you seeing, with the new academies, are you seeing a sway of more officers who actually live in Anchorage versus moving out to the valley?
I do have quite a few officers who live in the valley. I think it all depends on where, especially in Anchorage, it's hard to afford a home, where the valley they still can. I can tell you, they don't drive their police vehicles out there. The police vehicles are parked at Eklutna, and then they transition to their POVs and drive home and then switch when they come in. And that's all done on their own time because we don't pay them to do that. They have to be here at 7. But I think we do have maybe 25 or 30% of our department probably lives in the valley. That's just a guess. I couldn't tell you that for sure.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thanks again for coming today.
Yeah, yeah, I appreciate you guys coming. Thanks and for waiting as well. Also, like, just wanted to mention, appreciate like strategic planning efforts. I think that's super important, along with like OPPMs, policies and procedures manuals. I was wondering, like, largest issues in metrics or anything that you can directly relate to vacancies, be like dispatch related or response time related, or any kind of metrics that you see as having trends that could be directly related?
I would say the biggest trend that I can associate, like I said, I have 41 vacancies right now, but I have 441 officers. I still have 400 officers that are out here. I still have a pretty big police department and we still cover the city. There might be a response and a delay in response times, so people might wait longer. But the biggest effect it's going to have from my standpoint is officer initiated activity. In other words, officers don't have the time to go out there and do the traffic stops. Look for the drug dealers that might be dealing somewhere because they're going call to call to call. So when you have all those additional officers, it gives you the ability to be flexible, to do special assignments so that people can do officer initiated activity, so you can try to prevent crime instead of reacting to crime. So I think that's the biggest, to me, that's the biggest thing. And again, I tell citizens, you're going to wait longer for some calls. Depending on what time of day you call, if you call on any time during swing shift, which is 3 to 1 o'clock in the morning, you're probably going to wait a little while unless you live in Eagle River. But anywhere else, those guys are going. I can tell you, I did this for one of the groups yesterday. So far this year, we have responded. We've gone to 212,731 calls for service so far this year. That's from January to November 30th. That's a lot of calls for service.
Yeah, that's pretty.
And but with the officer initiative, I still do have traffic units. I still do have a drug DUI unit. I do have units that their specific goal is to go out there and prevent crime. But I would love for my entire force to be able to do that. And right now, the patrol officers can't.
No, it makes sense. I'm sure fleet issues don't help with some of that stuff as well. Have you guys like?
It's a good retention thing too. I can tell you the troopers made fun of us in one of their posts. They put on their thing because they're recruiting. They know that I'm their biggest competition too. They said, if you want to drive one of these piece of crap cars, join the Anchorage Police Department. This was on their Facebook post. They said, but if you want to drive a nice brand new Chevy Tahoe, come to the troopers. And I tell you, I guarantee you live in that car for 10 hours.
Mm-hmm.
It's your home, it's your office. And when you're not doing it, you live in that for the majority of your career. And when you're in a piece of crap, it makes you think that people don't care about you, which is not true at all.
No, I used to have a work truck. It was a huge upgrade from 2001 to 2020 when that happened. But do you like ballpark pay differences or between like a comparative job and the troopers versus in APD? Do you have like a ballpark?
Oh, we were probably 24% below them. And I think we did a bunch of correcting here. The biggest concern I have is it's the officers. I think we've taken care of that. My non-reps, like Sharon was saying, like Oren here, he's probably $50,000 underpaid compared to comparators out there in the city. And I'll probably lose a bunch of my non-represented employees because he has employees that work for him that are union employees. They just got an 8% raise January 1st. And he's like, all right, I'm going to get a 3.5% raise or whatever it is. But inflation was 10% this year. So I take a 6.5% cut this year. And I need my non-represented employees. And I know that the city is working on that, looking at the comparables. I need them to be comparable so that people want to come and work for the municipality. And especially, I care about the city, but I care about the police department. And when this when they're paid, they love working here, they love working for the police department, but you can't blame them for if they're not being appropriately compensated.
Are you seeing like the same issue with mental health clinicians and
No, we
MIT?
pay them, we made sure we paid them
They get a pay raise, like.
well above what they get paid on the outside.
Are you guys looking to grow that program at all? I know with the Crisis Now facility, I'm not sure the interaction with that, but that's being put up.
You can't, we can't have enough of, there's the work to go around it's never ending. Right, the things they can get involved in, so.
And there will be interaction with the Crisis Now facility. Is that correct?
So that's kind of interesting. That's an independent thing.
Do you guys have another hour to talk?
I know, I'm sorry. I'm trying to rattle them off. I know we're
We're
getting short on time.
Point that our officers are gonna take clients there and it's gonna be a compressed time frame. So right now we take them to the hospital and our officers are off the street for 2 to 3 hours.
Mhm.
They take them to Crisis Now and they have in and out in 5 minutes. And it's a legitimate 5 minutes. And so you can imagine the amount of time and energy we're saving there. And then the services they're gonna provide on the back end is also gonna save the police department a lot of time. So in that aspect, they're gonna help us. But in the current model, all the mental health resources will not become, there's not a plan to bring them all together. In my perfect world, that would be a multidisciplinary approach and it would all be centralized. So we'll get there someday, just take time.
I appreciate that. This is a good summary of a big issue.
Well, we are out of time, but we hugely appreciate you guys coming up, taking the time to come over and speak with us. A lot of really great information, gives us a lot of really good perspectives. Police department's always one that's of interest to us, I think as one of the larger, certainly critical departments for the municipality. So thanks for the work that you do and thanks for taking the time to talk to us.
All right, thank you.
We don't think that we have any members of the public here online or in person, so we can, so I think we can move on from that. We're just about out of time, but as far as any topics for open discussion, I think some of the subjects that Sharon raised about financial reporting, I think probably it seems like there's probably some interest in digging into those maybe in 2024.
Yeah, no, I guess super interested in operational policies, procedures type discussion, financial planning and analysis stuff. So I'd be happy to, eager to hear more about that.
Yeah, so would I. And Carmela, go ahead.
Thanks. I would echo that. I'd like to hear from OMB and the topics that we started on as well. And I wanted to ask for the January 11 meeting, rather than an informational report, could we have a focused or could we consider having a focused, more extensive discussion and briefing on the ASD budget process and what we're looking at for that? There's a ton of community impact around that budget, and I know that the section of code that applies to our work allows for us to do that, and it says that it's within the purposes. I think there could be a lot of community appreciation for that, to have that as its own line item. So I'd welcome discussion with that.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's a good point. We will have to think about availability for when they can come in, because we don't have anyone on from ASD right now. But I think that probably is timely. I think also going into the legislative session, I think it's going to be a big topic of discussion. So as far as our January meeting goes, would we prefer to talk about ASD or would we prefer to talk about financial reporting? We can always do one of those topics in February.
If I may, Mr. Chair, I would request that we do ASD in January, especially if they're in the middle of their deliberations on what they need to cut. And the ASD has to submit their budget to the Assembly in late February. So I would ask if we could pivot those. So ASD in January and then the second topic as a follow-on and as a part of perhaps a planning for 2024 in February.
Lindsay?
So just a thought, in the past, I think that we've, maybe we should just check in with the school board and see what works for them, because they might want to use our meeting earlier in February to kind of do a little bit of a dry run on their presentation. And it might be a bit more formalized. I mean, I think the disadvantage of that is, we don't really have the ability to provide input, but we could do that as a body at the January meeting and then have ASD present in February. I don't know. I think that's just kind of how it's historically been, but I don't.
Yeah, I think that that is closer to the timeline for it. Yeah, we can probably discuss with Sharon and with Katie from ASD, figure out timing that will work best. But I think probably those two topics then for January and February, we can figure out which order is the most logical. Seems like that's probably the way to go.
There was also some interest in having M&O come and speak to us.
We did have that we did have M&O, and I know that that's also timely during the winter. So do we want to, we only meet so many times, right? Is that one that we want to move forward as well? I don't know, or
I might say that I'd probably prioritize M&O and ASD, and then OMB being after those. It's not like M&O being winter very relevant, and ASD definitely during the budget process being really relevant. And then OMB, I think they'll be working on those throughout the year. So I might.
yeah.
The only thing with M&O, pushing M&O to March they might be a little, have a little more time.
It's true.
Just to make sure, I just want to make sure that we're like utilizing very busy people's time well.
Absolutely.
Brian.
Oh, I was just gonna kind of echo the same sentiment, but I'm sure this all would revolve around whatever everybody's schedule is and what time they do have. I know we can speculate, but perhaps we can reach out and find out what works best for their schedules.
Okay, yeah, I think we can have that discussion. But it seems like I think we've got plenty of things to discuss between those three. So no shortage there. Any other topics before we adjourn? Anything else? Any comments? Anything else anyone wants to say? All right, well, seeing nothing, then I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
2 seconds.
Second.
Second, okay. By Matthew, second by Al. Thank you. We are adjourned.
See you all next year.
Thank you. Happy holidays.
Yeah.
That was interesting.
Yeah.
It's